you can't do therapy wrong. Just the fact that you are showing up, having the courage and the right just to show up and look at some of that stuff and talk about it and begin to deal with it at whatever pace makes sense for you, that is probably one of the most courageous acts.
People think that they're supposed to say new things every time. Therapy is a lot of friggin' repetition.
And I talk a lot about therapy and the power of therapy on the show because I so believe in doing the work.
I mean, I think so much of the work that we do is about relational wounds, things that need to be also healed through relationship.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Living Richly podcast. We're so glad that you've joined us today. Today, we're going to be talking about what it means to do the work beyond all the hype and all the buzzwords. And we are really fortunate to have in studio today two great guests, Matthew Rippeyoung, Gundel Lake. Great to have you both here.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, Matthew, you're a returning guest. You've been on the show now. I think this is your third time. Make it to 5. You get a special robe, just like Saturday Night Live. Okay.
That's a
Do
promise.
I want to be Alec Baldwin?
I don't know. Do you?
Yeah. Do we need to talk about that today? Explore your Alec Baldwin fascination?
I don't see the couch.
Don't see the couch. The couch is in here. But we are going to be talking about a great subject matter. You're, of course, a psychologist, have your own practice here in Ottawa with a team. Gundel, you're a social worker,
right.
And you've been involved in this line of work also for a long time. I think you guys just said before the show, between the two of you, you have, 50 years of experience in therapy. Not on the couch, but on the other side of the table, right?
That's right.
So this is going to be a great conversation. Yeah. Let's start by, how do you define doing the work? What does that mean to you when you work with your patients, your clients?
I mean, I think it means a lot of things, but part of it is about building an awareness. I think taking things that are often implicit and making them more explicit. But all the while trying to embody that. It's not just about thinking. It's not just about learning things and sort of having the buzzwords and, the concepts, but it's about actually applying that and, trying to live in that dimension.
Yeah.
So well said.
Love that.
So well said.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the work, like the basis of a lot of the work ends up being getting to know yourself. Because I think a lot of people come to therapy and they're like, okay, I think I have X problem. How do you fix X problem? And each problem presents itself in a variety of ways.
Right.
And so if you want to know the generic things like there is the worldwide interwebs, I would encourage you.
Is that a thing?
It is a thing. Apparently, it is an information superhighway.
Oh.
Do you remember that in the 90s?
Yeah, the 90s called, they want the jargon back.
I know. Right. That.
Right? But there's all kinds of good reasons. You can go to a bookstore or a library and you can read generic things. But the way I think therapy is different is that it is really about getting to know oneself and how the problem even expresses itself in you. And that's, because there are things that are going to get me that aren't going to get you at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so the work, I think people are afraid sometimes to look behind the curtain because they don't know what they're going to see and they're worried about it.
100%. You talked about the magic land of the interweb and Google. And I wonder, if you could debunk some of the myths that you think people, when they're like, I have to do the work, what are some of those common myths you think people hold?
I think one of them is that CBT is going to fix everything.
Oh my God.
I think CBT absolutely has a place. It's helpful in a lot of circumstances, and it is an evidence-based approach, but it's one approach among many, and it's not sufficient to resolve every issue that every human has.
Right.
Can you tell us what CBT is, maybe,
yes.
for our listeners? And
yes.
Of it?
Yeah. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. And essentially, I think that refers to the idea that our thinking really affects our behavior. So if we change our thinking, then we change our behavior. But that leaves out so many other parts of the human experience. We aren't just our thinking brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The feeling brain often gets in the way of the thinking.
Yes.
Not for me.
CBT has been a powerful methodology that's been very helpful in my life, along with some others. I was surprised to learn that it was actually inspired by the ancient Stoics, that much of CBT was actually influenced by that. But they also missed out on, they were trying to emphasize, I think, the need to have a more disciplined approach in our thinking and not letting every wild thought that enters our mind kind of dictate how we live our lives. But it's missing out often on that emotional component, right? What about you? Some other misconceptions that we might debunk right at the beginning of the show?
That you can stop having feelings. Like, that's the thing. People come in and they're like, I want to do the CBT so that I always feel happy. And I'm like, oh, okay.
You're in the wrong place.
Right. Like, feelings aren't bad.
Right.
Like, I think people, again, are afraid of a lot of things. And like that, the idea that if I have a thought or if I have a feeling or if something runs through my head, that might mean I'm a bad person. And like, that's not okay. And so I gotta like shut all that down. Yeah. And like, our feelings, they're like more information. Yeah. Like they're very helpful.
That's a great way to put it. I'm always, when I'm in therapy, Sherry is like always, she's always like, yeah, that's an okay reaction or feeling or whatever. She's like, I would feel the same way. And every time she says it, I'm like, thank you. It's like she validates. she's like, you're supposed to feel. And it's funny how sometimes it's like I, from personal experience, how like guilty I can feel, or like I have that exact thought, man, where it's like, I'm a horrible person because I thought this. And it's, you're not a horrible person. It's a feeling, you're working through it. And we all feel at the end of the day.
Well, we all have the capacity for all of it. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. I think we get into this like, oh, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? You're a person. We're all good and bad. Like, let me do you a solid.
Yeah.
Put that away.
Yeah, exactly.
And we need that full range of feelings. We often talk about negative feelings and the positive feelings, right? Yeah. And you can't just cut off the ones that are uncomfortable and that you don't like. Anger, sadness, guilt even are every bit as essential to human experience as happiness and contentment and, all the ones that feel better to feel.
Right. Well, and you've talked about on the show, I think a lot of, and you know how passionate I am about specifically helping men, because men really struggle when it comes to emotional expression and even having any kind of emotional acuity, being able to name what they're going through. I think, what is it? Rage and chill are the two feelings that we so the two feelings. And you've described it as, it's like living in black and white as opposed to living in full color. Is it harder for men to do the work, this particular kind of work? Have you seen that? Or is that also a myth?
I mean, I think socialization is kind of where I go to this, that like, it's not technically harder, but having more emotional expression isn't usually reinforced. Like, I mean, I have to say, I was listening to the news on the way in this morning and listening to a tearful hockey player who lost the game. And he, as he's giving the press conference, I mean, I didn't see the video, but it sounded like he was crying. And I was like, well, good for you. Like, maybe the next generation has some hope. But yeah, I think the men that I see in my office, they're not used to exploring their feelings. And I mean, I don't think this is just men. I think a lot of men and women focus on what they should feel. Or like they'll come in, they're like, I don't know what I should feel about this. And I'm like, it ain't should, buddy. Like, what do you actually feel? Let's go with that. And then the digging, like, I mean, they can do it in a safe space.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm curious, what you you have this passion for helping men. Obviously, well, I think it takes a very special individual to go into your line of work. So I'm curious to know from both of you, like, what was that? Like, what drove you to take this career path in your life? Was it a moment? Was it like a random decision on a Saturday? I'm seeing I was at the VR. Price is right.
I got the short straw.
I'm curious. Yeah.
It was a bit random for me, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I was in school for history, and, I sort of fell into gender studies. I really felt like that way of thinking about the world really aligned with who I was. But what do you do with a degree in history and women's studies? And,
a lot of things. A lot of things.
Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings.
I mean, yes. And also, coming out of school, I really, had a question about that. But that sort of led me into doing social service work. And from there, I didn't, at that point in my life, I didn't know what social work was, but I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue this. I want to explore this. And, I think even the same thing happened for me with, pursuing psychotherapy as part of my social work practice. I didn't really understand what it was. I thought, early on in life that meant I had to have all the answers for people, that was kind of the job of a therapist. And right?
Kill me.
You don't have all the answers.
I don't even barely have one answer, so I don't know what I was thinking.
Well, and now I don't even need them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference for our listeners? Because I have to admit, I'm a bit foggy on the difference between, for example, like a therapist, a psychologist, and a social worker. I think there's a lot of similarities, but for our listeners who might be going, I don't know what the difference is.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, like, social work is a very broad profession. You can do lots of things as a social worker, some of which aren't about therapy at all. As a social worker in Ontario, I'm allowed to practice psychotherapy as a controlled act. And so, I sort of see psychotherapy as like a, sort of subset of social work. Yeah.
And psychotherapy, as you said, is a controlled act. So that means that there's legislation behind it.
Okay.
Who's allowed to provide it? There's only like 6 different people that can provide it.
Okay.
And it's like regulated provincially.
Yeah.
But so I would say like a big difference between a psychologist and a social worker is in our training where we focus is different. So psychologists focus on pathology, diagnosis, illness, and in the individual, where I feel like social worker is more like, let's look at the social structures that make people sick instead of locating the illness in a person.
Gotcha.
Okay.
It's kind of located in people. And then there's also this whole glut of psychotherapists so they have advanced training in how to provide therapy, but they might have a psychology background. They used to have social work backgrounds before they got their own college, but it's another level. And I would say like psychotherapists they're not trained so much in pathology, but in wellness.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, love that. We could almost this almost sounds like a bad joke, like a psychologist, a social worker, a gratitude coach, and a business coach walking into a bar. That's how that one could go. I'm curious. I think you've told the story before, but for the sake of our listeners today, what drew you into this line? What was that moment where you decided to throw yourself into this line of work?
Well, I've always liked being a helper. And certainly in the family I grew up in, with a disabled older brother and a mom who struggled, helping was always natural. And so when it was time to go to school, I went to school for psychology, but I really loved English. And so most of my classes in university were either psychology, sociology, or English classes after first year. And I realized what I really loved was stories. Like, I love stories. And so when it was time to decide what to do next, because what can you do with a BA in psych? Right?
I have a lot of feelings about that.
A lot, apparently.
And so graduate school was next. And so I was thinking about whether or not to go on and become an English professor or become a therapist. And I was like, well, I do actually want to do something practical, something that, I think, research on 14th century flags in England does contribute something. Like, not to take away from it.
For any flag fans out there, we don't want you unsubscribing from the show.
But, I think literature is really important culturally, but I wanted to be able to make a difference. And I'm not someone who is going to change the universe. I'm happy to change people one at a time. And so when I figured out that it was the stories and I wanted to be practical, then it was kind of a beeline to, okay, off we go.
Yeah. And lots of people have been helped as a result of both of your choices, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Amazing.
Actually.
Amazing.
I'm curious. My girlfriends and I talk all the time about our therapy journeys. I love that we're all in therapy. It's actually fantastic. And I talk a lot about therapy and the power of therapy on the show because I so believe in doing the work. But I will say, in talking with my girlfriends, we all have a very different experience with therapy. So I'm curious, is there, like CBT, is there this universal approach that works with everyone? Does it become a very like customized experience for everyone who goes into therapy? What's kind of your lens on that?
Well, when you were talking about CBT before, the thing that comes up for me is that with most of the theories or approaches, there are true believers who are like, this will fix everything. You have a nosebleed, CBT, right? But like you can interchange that with CBT, with emotion focus therapy, with eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, internal family systems. The true believers think that their way does everything. And so what we know from the research, like that was done in, I think, the 50s or the 60s, is the most important thing in therapy is fit.
Right.
So like they did research with trained professionals, and they had a bunch of housewives, and they taught the housewives active listening skills and like skills to demonstrate empathy. And there was no difference in the outcomes across the groups. And what was really came through is it's the fit. So this is why I do a lot of little videos, because before people come to the office, I want them to know that they want to see me, because if we're not going to be a good fit, that's like that's an expensive waste of money to come. And then also there are lots of people who are pleasers. And so they come and they're like, oh, it's not a good fit, but I'm just going to stay for 6 months. Right. I'm like, don't run, get out. Your therapist's feelings will not be hurt. They will get it.
Yeah. You need to, I always
love that.
equate it to like, you got to try on,
Yeah.
like I'm going to an event and I got to get a dress. I'm trying on 5 dresses before I find and when I find the one that works and that I love, that's the one. That's exactly, we talk
Therapy
about
is
it
a dress.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's no different than we quoted this several shows ago now. It seems like another lifetime ago now, but there was research done on what's the best diet, the most effective diet out there. And the other was what's the best exercise regimen, right, to get into shape. And all the research came back and they said none of it. It's the one you stick with.
Yeah.
Really, what it comes down to is you find what works for you. But I think everybody gets really passionate about their methodology and often tries to become a little bit, too rigid around that as to understanding that different things will work for different people. And just because your journey was this, someone else's journey may be very different, right? Yeah.
And I think the other piece about fit is, what's so essential to therapy working is the development of the relationship, over time. So I think, again, like debunking another myth, it's really hard often, unless it's like a very specific small problem, to like see results in 1 or 2 sessions. Because I think so much of the work that we do is about relational wounds, things that need to be also healed through relationship. And that takes time,
We're in such a immediate, I want immediate
6 sessions or less.
Yes. Like I can only imagine that people are like, I don't understand. I've come
7
twice.
steps.
Like, I'm not fixed either. I would imagine is people want something, right? It's the pill. It's the quick fix. It's like, and it's doing the work is doing the work. It's an investment in yourself.
Yeah.
And another myth to debunk that just came up. People think that they're supposed to say new things every time. Therapy is a lot of friggin' repetition. And you're not behind, you're not making a mistake. It's not that you didn't get it right the first time.
Not regressing.
No, not regressing. And to speak to the long-term relationships, there's some people, I've seen consistently for years and years, but there are people that'll come and work for a little bit, like maybe a couple years, and then they'll go away, and then they'll come back 3 years later, and they'll be like, oh, I thought I dealt with this. And it's like, well, you did. Like, newsflash, you did it. You did the work, but however, you continue to evolve because also, newsflash, we don't stop growing at 25.
Yeah.
Like, throughout life, things hit us differently. Or, people go through things and they come to therapy and then they have kids, and then their kids are like the age that they were when they went through something. And they're like,
Yeah,
I was so little.
So it hits you different. I always say in my therapy journey, at one point I got therapied out. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm good for a bit. And I was good for actually like, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years. And then all of a sudden something happened. And then I'm like, I really need therapy. And you go back, and it's actually really refreshing to hear you say it's okay to come back and talk about the same stuff. Because I think being on the other side of the table sometimes, it's like
we're doing it wrong.
Well, you and I in particular, I'm like, I think I'm doing therapy wrong.
I think I'm failing. I'm failing at therapy.
The only people that can do therapy wrong are over here. Like, no, but for real, legit. Because, that's it.
But I legitimately will go into therapy, and I'm like, I will look at Sherry and I'm like, I feel like she's looking at me going like, oh, not this again.
Well, I'm having a bit of a mind blown, because I've often told my story of my journey, my healing journey over the years, and started reaching out when I was younger, like a young leader, always pushed to the front of the room, lots of pressure. And by mid-20s, I was like, something's not right. Like I'm all smiles on the outside, but feel like pretty miserable on the inside. And so late 20s, I started reaching out for help. And I tell the story over and over again that I always did just enough work to get back in the game. It was almost like, put me back in, coach, I'm okay. It was kind of, but I wouldn't stick with it. And I it's just funny in that, just what you just said, kind of like, oh, well, maybe that was just the journey that I was ready for, and that it was in layers. But I've often looked at it as I did something wrong because I didn't stick with it. And if I had stuck with it, maybe I would have been better sooner, if that makes sense, right? But what I'm hearing is it's quite common for people to approach it that way.
Oh, yeah. No, I think this is where the social structure business, I think, comes in, because we perpetuate these bags of lies around the way that things are supposed to be, and that therapy is linear, or change is linear, or, if you're not seeing the results, well, you're doing it wrong. And the way I often explain it to people is all of us, all humans, we each have our little bag of shit. And in our bag of shit, there's probably 3 or 4 things. And, me too, me included. And when I'm doing well, the bag of shit is closed. When I'm not doing well, hi.
It starts to smell.
Right? And my personal issues come up, and they need to be reconciled. And then they go back in the bag, but they don't evaporate.
Right.
They're always going to, it's like with a broken bone. Once you break a bone, that bone's always going to be a little bit more vulnerable than other bones. You didn't break. It doesn't mean you're broken. It's just that's, I don't know, it's the way life is.
Yeah, and I think most growth, whether we're talking we're in therapy or any kind of personal growth and development that we're doing outside of that, because there's all kinds of ways that we can heal. And I'm really grateful that although there's lots of information out there now, it can feel a bit overwhelming. At least we're talking about it in a way that we didn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You couldn't talk about not being okay a while ago. The stigma was so bad. Now it's almost like uncool to not be sick.
I would thank Tony Soprano for that. Tony Soprano did a lot for our business.
Yeah, he did. He sent a lot of people to therapy.
I just went way back in my head there.
Yeah.
I can see the room. I can see him sitting in the chair. Yeah.
But I think most growth is incremental. It's like micro evolutions. And I refer to, so this podcast, in many ways, was birthed out of my personal journey back early 2022. I describe it as my second great awakening. And the way I describe it to folks is nothing magical happened. I was going through some shit, and I was getting some support. And then it feels like all the work I'd been doing for a really long time, it kind of landed. And all of a sudden, my perspective shifted. Not all of a sudden, but over a period of very short few months. But I don't think I could have got there if I hadn't put the time in all those years before, making sometimes didn't one step forward, 2 steps back, it felt like. So I guess it's like that.
Well, we call it consolidation. That's what happened, right? It's that all the learnings kind of coalesce together, and then, I can see the other side of this cup now.
Right. I couldn't see it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
And I think too, if you think about it a little bit like exercise, right? You do a hard workout, you get all these little muscle tears. And then you need to rest. And that's what helps sort of build growth over time. And so I think the idea of giving yourself permission to take it slowly and to pace it, actually helps us absorb and consolidate, what it is that's happening, not on conscious levels.
Well, and if you don't, like if you decide, okay, I'm going to blow the doors off, I'm just going to go straight through, you're not actually doing any work, because we all have this like window of affect tolerance, we call it. Affect is like feeling. And in order to process things, you have to stay in your window. We all have a varying size of window.
Some have a pinhole.
Yeah. Right? But that's where you have to do the work, right? Because if you're trying, if it's too intense, you're just re-traumatizing yourself. All your circuitry floods. You don't learn anything. You don't get anything except maybe diarrhea. And then if it's...
So you heard it here first, folks. If you're getting diarrhea after your therapy session, you might want to slow down.
It's not a good fit.
It's not a good fit.
Not a good fit. No, and talk to your therapist about like, that was too much, right? Like, because the pacing, to your point, is important. Because if you're not, you got to push a little, but if you push too much, it doesn't work. And if you don't push enough, you're just kind of...
Yeah, so I did something, it has a name and I don't know, but there's a lot of tapping and you go back to childhood. Yeah. Go back and kind of relive. And you're reliving a lot of things that happened, and it's very like raw. And that's when I got therapied out. And I was like,
shocker.
I'm like, why do I have to relive this to like move through it? And so that was a moment for me where I was like, you talk about, I'm like, that wasn't working for me. It wasn't a good fit for me. That type of therapy was definitely something for me that I was like, I couldn't, like, I was literally running out the door. I'm like, bye.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good conversation to be having.
Yes.
Right? About, I lose 2 days after every session.
Yeah, like toast.
Yeah.
Like emotionally it's like you really do feel like you're reliving some childhood trauma, and it's very heavy. Very heavy.
And I think that's a great point. And another myth, like, therapy is not about reliving the things. Yes, you might have to revisit, but we always want to help you try and stay anchored in the present, kind of oriented in time and space, so that there's the distance, and I think it's a really good sign if you feel like you're in it too much. Like we were saying, that's an important conversation to have with the therapist.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, we can't always gauge that. Maybe it happens when you're home and you're not in session with us.
Yeah.
But part of our job is to be trying to watch for that and assess for that. So there's lots happening in us while we're with, anyone that isn't necessarily explicit. But I think it's important to sort of understand that that's also part of doing the work.
Well, and it's the vulnerability to be able to say that. Like it's one of my things, but anyways, being vulnerable, even with my therapist, is hard for me. And when you talk about the fit and finding the person that you can truly feel vulnerable with, takes a lot of time. Well, for me, I'll speak for me. It takes me a lot of time to be able to have, like, to even go back in and say that didn't work for me. I'd be like, I'm failing at
like you and me both. You and me both. I mean, I'm very present and engaged in this conversation right now, but that truth bomb of like, I wasn't doing it wrong just because I took time and I wouldn't stay. There's a bit of it's kind of fucking with me right now in a good way. Because again, we talk about, you said your bag of shit, right? Like I use the language that I think most of us, there's probably 3 or 4 lies that are running our lives, right? That we've come to believe about ourselves primarily, or how the world works. And for me, it was about discovering, really getting present to what those lies were, why they came to be, and how I might begin to frame it differently. And I remember one of the signs I was so proud of myself. About a year ago, I looked back on some old journal notes. I love to write. That's how I reflect, get stuff out of my head and get it on the paper where I can look at it. And early on in my work, my mentor, Jim Harrington, had asked me, I had such a deep sense of self-loathing. We've talked about this before. Like, it was so bad. I was the guy that was smiling and encouraging everybody else, but most of the time felt I didn't deserve a second chance, didn't deserve grace. That's how I felt about myself. And he encouraged me to write down 3 positive things 10. He said, I want you to write down 10 things about yourself that you love. and I couldn't get past 3. I honestly couldn't, and I struggled with the 3. Well, in time, over time, it probably took me a period of about 2 years. I ended up with 20.
Oh.
And the 20 were, a lot of them were aimed, now that I better understood the lies that I believed, they were almost like anchoring statements to say the opposite thing, right? To kind of challenge that lie. And it was about a year ago I revisited those notes. And what was interesting is I didn't need those anchoring statements anymore, because fundamentally I didn't believe any of the bullshit that had made them necessary in the first place. I had, right? And so that was a moment where I was kind of celebrating growth. But I think, again, like if anyone is listening to this show, like if you get nothing else out of it, you can't do therapy wrong. Just the fact that you are showing up, having the courage and the right just to show up and look at some of that stuff and talk about it and begin to deal with it at whatever pace makes sense for you, that is probably one of the most courageous acts a human being can ever do.
So on that, for the people listening who are like, I'm busy, right? They're out there.
We did an entire show on that we used the I'm busy badge like it's some kind of badge of honor. Can we stop describing ourselves that way?
How can people weave it into their life so it doesn't, feel like one more thing they have to do in their day? Is there a way, like you recommend people, is it one session a week? Is there a way that they can start, I guess? Like, what is the best way for the busy people?
I think you do have to think about what resources do I have to shore up the base? Because if you are really too busy and you're not going to have the things around you that you need to go into therapy, digging into your stuff is going to be really destabilizing. So for me, it is around like, is it the right time for you? Maybe this isn't the right time for you. But if you would like it to be the right time for you, then you're going to have to carve out some space.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think the thinking about doing it is also a step. It may not feel like that big a thing, but to even recognize, maybe it would be of benefit somehow, for me to explore this process. There's already something happening inside. And I think, maybe you can't take this step, in the next 2 weeks or in the next 6 months. But I think that very active questioning can actually be quite powerful.
What are some things one might do, like outside of traditional therapy, like working with a therapist? We both work with the same one, Sherry Kane out of the U.S., and I've been working with Sherry for years and years and years. She's also the mindset coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, who won the Super Bowl this year, and I give her all the credit. It's because she was working with those players. Great job, Sherry. Right, great job. Wow. And it's part of my regular rhythm. I sit down with her every 4 to 6 weeks, whether I think I need it or not. For me, it's a good space just to kind of talk out some of the recent things that have happened, and because residue builds up, right? And you don't even realize it sometimes just because of life events. But outside of traditional therapy, what are some things folks might do? Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they don't have the space, but they know they're ready for something. What are some things you would encourage outside of therapy for people to take some steps towards becoming more whole?
I mean, you talked about how much you like to write. So the difference, up here, we can have anywhere from 5 to 9 thoughts at once and be convinced that we are working our business out. When it is just tumble, 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 tumble.
It's a mess up there.
It is a mess up there. But so whether you're talking to someone or whether you're writing, you're starting to frame your story. Stories have to make sense. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's often in the talking where we start to say things and we're like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't quite like that. And we start to do the editing. And it's the same with writing, right? That it helps you organize. It's like, I think of it like organizing a closet, right? Like you got to take all the shit out and then you have to find a place for it. And so writing is something, you can put notes on your phone, you
can dictate into your phone even. Like you could just speak it into your phone and record it that way too now, right?
Right. And so sometimes some of the more digital ways are helpful because you can search. Yeah. And you can go back and see oh, wait, when else was I talking about feeling like a loser?
Oh, a lot.
35 hits.
in the last week. Yeah. we call it, I use the language, until it passes through the lips or the fingertips, you don't have clarity, right? It's just a jumbled mess. But there's that act of explaining it to someone else or writing it down. The brain automatically has to apply a number of filters to it to make it make sense or be more cohesive. Even though sometimes I reread some of my old stuff, I go, that wasn't very cohesive. But it was my attempt to make sense of what was happening at the time. What would you add to that? Like non-conventional ways to keep growing?
Well, I guess one thing I would encourage folks not to do is like rely kind of solely on social media, like sound bites and
there's a lot of that,
little clips. Yeah, because I think the things that are often missed in those, kind of 1 second noticing is the nuance. And so, that might initiate something, but try not to take, those things as absolute truth. If you identify with something, I think it's important to explore it further somehow, do some more in-depth reading or, have a conversation with someone about that, but don't just take that as kind of a truth, about your experience. I think for me, something that's really important to keep in mind is that this work takes time. It unfolds, as we let ourselves unfurl. Right. And so, that idea of like organizing through writing or through conversations with people, it could be like a peer group, that you're working things through. It doesn't have to be a professional setting. No.
Right.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about community on the show, Living Richly Nation, our community, and how important the people are that surround you. So how important is that community in someone's sort of, maybe I won't call it success because that's me going success on their personal journey, growth. I'm going to do it right.
No high performers at this table.
But how big of a role does the community, someone's community, the people that surround them play in their ability to shift and grow and change?
As a social worker, I think it's like number one, because we are relational beings. We depend on people. So much of what happens in our inside is connected to what is happening in relationship, not only with people, but with the environment and with social structures. And so I think, in as much as we're encouraged to be busy all the time, we're encouraged to be very individualistic. I think those things in and of themselves actually contribute to some of the pain, and distress that people experience. So when we say, hey, I'm going to invest in connecting with my community or developing a community, that's a pretty radical act, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it said that most of us, our deepest wounds were in relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our deepest healing will happen in relationship.
Yes.
Yes.
Matter of fact, my mentor, Jim, has often said that we turn to therapy. Thank God for folks that do, like you, that do what you do, right? Like I've benefited so much from folks that have devoted themselves to this career path and this service path to help other human beings who are struggling. But if we knew how to do community better, a lot of what we look for in therapy, we would find in community. Do you guys agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
Can I get an amen up in here? No, but it's true. To go back both to the community and to the vulnerability part. Yeah. I think a lot of times we hear about, who you surround yourself with is going to have an impact on you, as though you need to pick elite leaders or, achievers or whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter who's around you if you're not vulnerable with them.
Right.
And you don't have to peel off your skin for everyone you meet when the guy comes to deliver your mail. You don't have to, by the way. But I know I have 3 people who know everything about me.
Yeah.
Everything. Mm-hmm. And I probably have half a dozen other people that know almost everything about me.
That's amazing.
And so, I still go to therapy. Yeah. At this point in my life, I'm in an active phase of being in therapy now. But the things that I get out of being able to really be myself with other humans, that is what does the work for, little Matthew, who was really hurt, being able to have people see me. And that's the thing about long-term therapy is that it is a relationship.
Yeah.
While you might not know all the details of our lives, we get to know each other, and you get to be seen, you get to be heard. And, once we collect a few years of information, it's not hard for us to be like, oh, yeah, that sounds like that time when, you were at whatever and this happened. And people go like, how did you remember that? And I'm like, well, because it's important to you. Like, it's important to your story. And so it connects people back to themselves. But you can't do that in speed dating.
Right. And again, part of my passion of creating a space, that's what the Foundry is all about, is creating a community for men 40-ish plus that have experienced enough life that they're probably and highly successful. I work primarily with business owners and leaders. That's my job. That's my business is around that. So, but creating a space for them to have a safe space to actually talk that I'm not fine actually in some areas of my life. Because I think men find it really, really hard. I think most guys have bros around them, and the conversation never goes really beyond babes, blood sports, and business. And there's one more. Booze. Right? That most of the conversations are just very superficial. And so we have what is a pseudo community of bros that we hang out with. But do we have those people in our lives that can be a safe space where I can talk about what I'm going through and seek advice and maybe get called on my bullshit, right? But in a out of love and accountability, that's really, really missing. And I think for guys, my passion is coming through here, that I'm really inspired to do something on that front, because I see it so many times. People come to us for business coaching and leadership coaching, and within 1 or 2 sessions, I have highly successful individuals who are talking to me about their marriage breaking down at home, or how they feel depressed and how they've lost their way, and they feel that I didn't sign up for all this, and are feeling all kinds of things. And so while we're not therapists, we certainly hear, oftentimes we act like we don't claim to be one, but they look to us to be a place where they can sometimes be the first and only place where they can be truly themselves, not pretend, and not be judged. Right.
And so it's all about showing up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you can you don't have to wait till you're in your 40s to get this. Like, before I lived in Ottawa, I lived in a small town in Nova Scotia, and I did have a group of these dudes who, we did fun things too.
Yeah.
But we were able to talk about our struggles. I think part of it, the group formed around somebody's wife was dying and they had really little kids. I'm going to cry. But there was no escaping. And I remember when I first met this guy, it was at a Boxing Day party at one of our mutual friends' house. And his wife, who was dying, came up to me and she said, "Oh, you're Matthew? You have to be my husband's friend. He's going to need you."
Wow. And
so there were 5 or 6 of us that really coalesced around this guy who had 2 little kids. And we were all dads. But it's like, somebody goes first, and then the rest of us were able to show up. And that's again, vulnerability. That's really what it's about outside of therapy.
Powerful.
That's super powerful.
Yeah.
So for someone right now, someone who's listening, who's like, they're feeling kind of stuck, maybe they've been thinking about therapy for a while, what's their first step? What do they do? How do they take action? If they're listening right now and they're like, okay, I'm hearing it, I get it, I'm feeling empowered, where do they start?
Ask a friend, because I think friends often know us, in a particular way, and can be a really...
Get a referral is what.
Exactly. Yes. Do you work with someone that I think might be a good fit for me? Yeah. And just collect names. Yeah. And ask around with people that you trust.
I love that, because again, we referred to it earlier on the show, like that courageous act of finally moving beyond contemplation to I'm going to take action and reach out. It often takes more than one try to find the right fit. And if the first experience, it took so much courage and guts to show up to that first session, whether it was in person or on Zoom or whatever, and it doesn't work out, I think a lot of folks then just say, oh, it's not for me, right?
Yeah.
But you have to like getting a referral might help with that. And I would add like keep trying.
Yes.
You're probably not going to get it right on the first time.
Yeah, and I know I'm thinking like when one of my kids needed therapy. And what's the first thing I do? I ask all my girlfriends. I'm like, who's your kids there? Like, would that work for me? And I can tell you more often than not, that's the route I've gone. And it's some have worked out, some haven't. That's that fit part. But like, what an amazing safe space to start. Yeah, love that.
You know, I like advertise in particular ways. I would say like 95% of my private practice clients are through word of mouth.
Wow. Right. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, amazing.
I think the other thing about this Ask Your Friends is it also requires you then to connect more deeply with somebody.
Right.
Right. And so that usually if we start with our good friends, we're probably going to get a good reception.
Right.
They're not probably going to say, well, you're fucked.
And if they do, choose better friends.
Well, I mean, you can say that with love sometimes.
Yeah.
Depends on the nature of your relationship. Right. Like, I know that there are things that if people just read our texts, they would question our connection. But it is deep and abiding.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see that. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, without revealing anything too personal, what does doing the work look like for you right now? Not as the one helping someone else, but in your own journey. What are some things you might share that might inspire our listeners?
I mean, for me, kind of one of the things that's always in my bag is I can take that on too. Like, and it's not more tasks, it's emotional stuff. And so by the end of 2023, there was like a lot of really hard stuff happening in my family. And it just like I was getting pushed over the edge. And so for me, the work is being able to go someplace and to not apologize and to not say, is it okay if I tell you this? Like, I think it took me about 5 years to get to that with you as a friend. That like, and even sometimes still I say like, I'm not going to apologize. I need this. But for me, being able to ask and not just like set up all the conditions so that I'm more likely to get my needs met, but to be like, I need you to carry this with me. Like, I can't carry this by myself anymore. Wow. And there, I don't always have other the places I go already are not enough.
Right.
So that's what it is.
I love that. I mean, a script I've shared on the show many times that I still am working on is being a burden.
Yeah.
I've been the helper my whole life. Even as a kid. And so when I feel I need to lean on the people, even the people closest to me, I feel often like I'm being an inconvenience or that I'm putting too much on them. And so I tend to isolate. So I really resonate with that. Like, not apologize and say, hey, I need to lean on you right now. Can you just be there for me and hear me out?
And just, and then I'm the apology at the beginning. Like, I'm really sorry. It's like, you're like, no, it's okay to just ask for what you need, but it's amazing how hard. And I know there's a lot of people listening who feel exactly the same way.
The things people apologize for in therapy that like kind of at home make me laugh.
Oh my God, that could be like a whole show.
Crying. Yes. Like, okay, I buy Kleenex in bulk. Like, come on.
We keep
I go to
Kleenex
Costco.
in business.
Yes. Repeating themselves, saying something difficult, like, or even being like 5 minutes late, like, dude, it's your time.
I'm good.
Like, if you come here, like, you're 5 minutes late, it's a 50-minute hour.
Yeah.
You're not late.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's time to wrap up the show, but this has been a phenomenal conversation. Again, I think someone listening in who has had some hesitation or misunderstandings about what doing the work looks and sounds like. Obviously, we can't cover all of that, so we'll probably just have to have you guys back for a follow-up discussion on this. Final words of wisdom from each of you to our listeners on this subject. What would you want to leave them with as that final word of advice?
It's all about fit. So, I mean, it used to be you find a therapist in the yellow pages back in the day. We're all online. So read what we say, or if there's videos or if there's social media, look and see if we are your vibe. Because if we are not your vibe, you don't like that. Don't. Don't. Someone is your vibe. You will fit with somebody, I guarantee.
Yeah. Love that. Love that.
Yeah, and for me, I would say, and I'll give full credit to a former colleague who used to say the work is about feeling better, not to feel better, but to feel better. It's like the process of feeling and honing that and being with it and being able to tolerate it and get comfortable with it is really what this work is about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna borrow that one.
That's good, eh?
To feel
So many truth bombs. I'm gonna have so much processing to do out of this conversation in a good way from this conversation. So thank you to both of you. We'll put in all of the show notes how to contact with you guys, like how to follow you online, how to find you if people are interested in reaching out to you. But thank you for taking the time, and thank you for listening in, Living Richly Nation. We hope this has been an insightful conversation for you. Doing the work. Listen, it's worth the effort. You can set a whole new tone for your life and take ownership of where your life's going as opposed to just continue to kind of coast and perhaps live an unhappy life. It's all about living richly, and that's why we're here. It reminds you to visit our website, livingrichly.me, where you can find out all the information about the show, all the show notes, and links to both our Facebook group and the Life Vision Challenge, which actually we launched a year ago at this time, which is pretty exciting. So you want to avail yourself to that. Keep tuning in. We're so thankful for your support. Like, follow, subscribe, and get the word out. And we'll see you next time. Until then, keep living your best life.